Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by, and welcome to the Managing Remote Employees conference call. At this time, all participants' lines are in a listen-only mode. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. And to ask a question during that time, you may press star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. And if you would like to withdraw your question, you may press the pound key. I would now like to turn the conference call over to your host today, Ms. Kris Chester. Ma'am, you may begin.
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar for Managing Remote Employees, a topic that is relevant, I think, to most of us at the present time. I'm Kris Chester. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Chester Financial, and then joining me today is my business partner, Mary Yorth, who's our Chief Human Resources Officer. Now, we understand how important your time is, especially as these unprecedented events continue to unfold. So we do hope that you find the content both relevant and value. As you know, like I said, we're all faced with the challenge right now of leading our teams as well as leading ourselves from home. So prior to joining Chester, I had a very large team. I had over 800 people who reported to me. They were spread across the U.S. and really across the globe. And for my U.S.-based teams, many of them had the privilege of telecommuting up to 3 days a week. And so the challenges that we faced, as well as some of those strategies for overcoming those challenges, were really very similar to what we and most likely you are experiencing today as we find ourselves in an almost 100% remote working environment. And some of these more common challenges can be shifting from co-locating together, in an office to remote working without having that face-to-face relationship between the supervisor and the team member. Because supervisors who are not accustomed to this, they may wonder if the team member is really working as hard as they did in the office or perhaps as efficiently as they did when they were in the office. And then the flip side of that is that the team member may wonder if the supervisor is even aware of what they're dealing with day in and day out, because if they can't see each other, they're not able to communicate in real time. So, this is a real concern. And then because you're not physically sitting together, it becomes more difficult to get answers from supervisors or from your coworkers in real time. Even when you establish these methods of communication, let's face it, it takes more effort, and that effort can become an obstacle to getting what you need and what they need. And this lack of access, it can impact your relationships with your coworkers sometimes, as it's really more difficult to find that common ground and experiences when you lose that in-person interaction. It's also difficult to foster a culture of inclusion and belonging with a remote workforce. It is really, really hard because people can feel isolated and they can feel disconnected when they're separated from the group, even when everybody in the group is separated from one another. When one loses that cultural connection, their engagement and their connection with the company can also drop, which over time can influence a team member's decision to stay with the company or seek employment elsewhere. And finally, there are those distractions, especially when one is not accustomed to working remotely. And these distractions can range from a suboptimal workspace, inadequate equipment, visitors, pets, those piles of laundry that call your name while you should be working, and really now more than ever before, our children. Because working parents are now faced with not only having to do their jobs in under less than ideal circumstances, but they may also be homeschooling their children until our schools are reopening. So these distractions, they're real, and not only can they cause performance to decrease, but they can also add a tremendous amount of stress to both you and your team, stress that you all are under in this current environment. Mary, over to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about supporting remote workers. And in all actuality, it's somewhat the same as when you're in the office, yet it's different because of those challenges that Kris laid out for us. So what are some things that might be helpful just as you would do in the office, yet these things happen much more organically when you're in the office with somebody. So structured check-ins, and it's not, one of the things I recommend for people who are trying to support their remote workers is, just let the employees know that you're checking in with them, seeing how they're doing, what are their concerns, what questions do they have, because having something that is a little bit reliable, that they know they're going to talk to you at 9 o'clock, or you have a call at 10 or something like that, just like you do in the office, where they know that you're available, does help people feel, again, as Kris was saying, more included, and it does continue to build that culture that you have already built when you're in the office environment. There's a lot that can happen on communication. So, what would that look like? Consider using video. For some people that's new and it's a little bit challenging, especially with the other distractions that might be going on in the workspace, as Kris mentioned, kids, pets, laundry, other assorted things, and teaching people how to do a video conference. So, for example, helping them understand that putting their computer or their phone on mute when they're not speaking is very helpful when you're in the home environment, simply because you sometimes don't realize some of the noises that are happening around you because we become so accustomed to it. And then the remote social interactions, virtual events. So one of the things last week, my team in HR is also obviously working remote right now, and we had our normal HR meeting, and so everybody was there, and there was quite the feeling of feeling a little disconnected from everybody, even though there had been individual calls going on and emails and so forth. So what we decided to do was set up every morning going forward at 10:30, we are having what we call coffee time. And it's literally 15 minutes. We all get on a video chat, and we're just, how's your morning going? How's the pets? What's going on with this? And people are just doing little updates on their families and things that they've shared. And it's quick, it's simple, you get to see everybody, and it does help just to be able to have that little bit of interaction. And then encouragement and support. One of the things that I continually remind myself, as I remind my team, is that we're all in the same boat. People all over our country and, quite frankly, all over the world are really having to learn to deal with this new normal as we work through this pandemic. And so what does that really look like? And for a lot of people it looks differently, but at the end of the day it's all the same. Our work styles have changed. We have parents, we have kids, things that we're concerned about looking after. Employees will have some concerns about, is it okay if I go to the grocery store? What happens if I am around somebody who has this? And everybody is dealing with that. So being able to take these 4 things and wrap those around your business as it makes sense for your employees could be some ways that you can support your workforce. And the other thing is keeping employees in the know, and that sort of is kind of like an overlying thing in this whole support aspect is let them know what's going on with your big clients. Let them know, you guys are working on a project that maybe has gotten put on the back burner or some other things are happening within your organization. But letting people know that maybe they would have heard, just around the office some things were happening. So trying to keep people as connected to your business as possible really is sort of the overarching feature on that. And Kris, if you'd like to walk us through some specific tips to help the employees.
Sure, I'd be glad to, Mary. So building on some of these support tactics that Mary mentioned, let's talk about some of the tips and tricks that we found helpful that can address some of these challenges and can help make your workday and your employees' workday a bit more productive and hopefully a bit less stressful. And some of these may seem obvious, but I think they're worth sharing. So number 1, get dressed. have you all been switching from maybe your day pajamas to your night pajamas? Because I know I was for the first few days, but now I have to get up and get dressed just to feel human and to feel like myself and to feel like I'm working. And also, it kind of helps me to avoid that surprise video conference call if I am, in pajamas. Number 2, let's make a work schedule. Oh, that's breaks. All right. Schedule work breaks into your schedule. So again, kind of avoid the trap of working too much and getting burnt out. And this will also help if you have children or family members at home, because if you have these children that are kind of outside of your office, if you're behind a closed door, it might be a good idea to check in to see that the house is not burning down. It's also very helpful to have a dedicated workplace that, it really doesn't have to be a true home office, but it should be a space where you're able to dedicate time to your work, preferably with a door. And, the couch is not ideal, nor is the kitchen table if you have other family members that are also working out of the home or perhaps attending remote school. I actually, full disclosure, I usually start off my day on the couch, but I do it really early in the morning on my laptop, but then I actually move to my office when the actual work day starts. So speaking of doors on your workspace, one tactic is to keep the door closed when you need that focused work time or when you're on a conference call. And one thing that I've seen folks do is you can place a sticky note or something similar on the door that will signal when you can not be disturbed. And, I mentioned at the start of the call that I managed a very large remote team in my former role, and we actually required our remote employees to have a dedicated workspace with a door. They had to prove it to us before we would allow them to work remotely, and if they didn't have it, then they couldn't enjoy that privilege of working from home. Also really important in your workspace is having the right equipment to work efficiently. And the obvious things such as computer, monitor, keyboard, right, those are obvious. But also think about, say, your chair. Is it comfortable enough for you to sit in all day? Do you have proper lighting? You might need to invest in headphones if you're sharing a home with others. All of these things together really contribute to having a full equipped workspace, which is going to enable you to be and your employees to be more productive and less stressed. So let's also talk about the socialization aspect. Don't forget to socialize, even if it's virtually. I had a virtual happy hour over Zoom with my girlfriends last Friday, and it was just what I needed after that crazy week that we had. And, as Mary mentioned, what she does with her HR team by gathering for a morning virtual coffee hour, you can do that. You can do it with lunch. You can celebrate achievements, birthdays, big business wins, whatever social activities you would normally do in the office, you can also do remotely. It just might take a little bit more creativity and planning. And again, as Mary mentioned, video conferencing is a great socialization tool. The other thing that I find really helpful is to make a work schedule and stick to it. It's really easy to get sucked into working too much when your office is in the next room. So focus on yourself and try to avoid burnout. Also need to acknowledge the distractions that you're most vulnerable to and have a plan to avoid them. My biggest distraction is my dogs. I have two 60-pound golden retrievers who think they're still lap dogs, and they will both try to crawl in my lap at the same time and move my hand off of the keyboard when they want attention, which is, by the way, all the time. So I do have to keep my door closed to keep them out, and then we'll just work in those breaks into my schedule so that I can bribe them with treats to leave me alone for a little while. And then the last time I want to mention is it's so critical to communicate with your team to help keep your team connected. Yeah, that communication, it's even more important when you're remote because you lose that opportunity for the ad hoc communications, right? You're stopping by somebody's workspace to share information. You have, a quick instruction to give that, that now you have to take the time to sit down and, call or type out an email. you know, you're accustomed to these face-to-face meetings that you just don't have the luxury of doing anymore. So when you're not together in person, you lose that benefit of reading body language, right, unless you're on a video conference. If you used to communicate a message in one way when you're in the office, you might now need to communicate that same message in multiple ways. So, for example, you might need to send a message out in an email and on a conference call, and then again in a weekly recap of key messages. So, you know, again, I want to reinforce the importance of video conferencing. It's so effective. It really helps you keep those personal connections alive. It helps to see the face. It helps to see the body language. And especially when you're sitting on these conference calls, which have now replaced your meetings, it's really easy when you're just a voice on the phone for folks to disengage. So if you're able to video conference, you'll keep folks engaged. You can see their face. It feels more like you're in person. And again, we found that very helpful. We're using it more and more every day as Chester is remote. You're going to find the rhythm that works best for you and your team. There's no one-size-fits-all, but hopefully one or more of these methods will be successful for you. Mary, I'm going to hand it over to you to wrap us up.
You bet. And so we do have a page here with additional resources and ideas. And I'm just going to take one of these because we've covered a lot of things that are in there already. But the one that I thought was interesting was Mind Your Manners in Online Meetings by Following These Tips. And there were a couple that I thought I'd share with you, although we've sort of hit on one of them already. But the one thing that I'd like to stress here, you know, to help you and your team members is remembering your mute button, that if you're eating, moving paper around, mute is your friend. That helps the conference and or the video conference go, you know, much smoother where people aren't being distracted by what's going on. The second thing, Kris had mentioned having some headphones, and I will just talk about a little bit you know, when I went out and read through this was really, and I've experienced this, where somebody has headphones on, but they don't have really quality headphones on. So I've been on a call where it's so hard to hear that person, and then they're, you know, they're having to get off their headset and this, that, and the other. So if you are going to use a headset, you know, test it out, especially if you're giving your employees a headset. Make sure that it's a quality headset and that they're, you know, they can hear the people on the other end of the phone easily. And then the third one is to dress appropriately and not, you know, not let's stay out of our sweats and all that, because we've talked about that. But I'm sure, because I've had some people send me some stuff already of people who are not paying attention when they're on video conferences and the things that they're doing that other people can see, whether they're not dressed appropriately or the clothes don't fit or they're not aware of their surroundings. So helping to educate your employees and yourself a little bit, if necessary, on, you know, what's actually happening and what can everybody see while I'm on this video call, I think would be you know, something to share with your employees and certainly be thoughtful of. There's three at the bottom: visit museums via virtual tours, host a Netflix party, and learn to be inspired by a TED Talk. All of those are great. Those are obviously mostly, you know, not really work-related, but they're great stress busters. On TED Talk, there's a good, if somebody's looking for something that's work-related, Simon Sinek has, you know, Why Ask Why, and I would just encourage everybody to go out and take a look at that. It's really inspiring. So there's lots of things that people can do out there to get some stress relief as they're working remote. With that said, I think we'd really like to open it up to any questions from the audience.
And ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad. Once again, that is star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad if you would like to ask a question. We will pause for just a moment to compile that Q&A roster. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, that is star followed by the number 1 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. All right, and at this time, we have no questions.
Thank you so much. We appreciate everybody joining today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation. This does conclude today's conference call. You may now disconnect.
Kris, are you still there?